In his newest book, Crisis of Confidence, reclaiming the historic faith in a culture consumed with individualism and identity, Carl Trueman explores how the historic creeds and professions of the church can help to shape God's people toward greater and greater Christ-likeness. In an age of self-expression and self-creation, these old summaries of biblical teaching are all the more important as we seek to live faithfully in an increasingly anti-Christian world. Let's get started. Carl, thank you so much for joining me again on the Crossway Podcast.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
So the subtitle of this new book is Reclaiming the Historic Faith, Culture Consumed with Individualism and Identity. And we'll get to the historic faith part of that subtitle in a bit, but anyone who's followed your writing over the last few years likely knows that you've spent a lot of time thinking and writing about the modern West and our obsession with individualism and identity. And your book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, I'm sure many listeners have heard of that book, maybe read that book. It's a big book, but it's all about
I said, what are we going to do?
So I wonder if you can just do some level setting for us. What do you mean when you say that our culture today is consumed
Shop new Retinal 4K cameras and doorbells at Ring.com.
identity?
Well, someone say it's a big book. It's difficult to summarize in space. But what I would say is that essentially we thought that autonomous that message society sends to us, the way we find out fulfillment is in realizing that autonomy and freedom. Well, it doesn't come alone. That carries certain implications. It carries certain tilts into the way we imagine the world and our relationship with the world to be. One of them, for example, would be tilt us towards thinking that history is somewhat oppressive. Because what is the origin of inequality? What are the origins of the differences between us? What are the origins of the problems we see in society around us? Well, if you think that human beings are pristine, autonomous individuals, you'll tend to think that the origins of the problems come from institutions, come from traditions, come from history. And that makes us what I would describe as anti-historic culture. That we're people who are intuitively suspicious of the points us away from those things towards the future or towards self-creation, towards those things that serve to make me feel good, as opposed to those things which make me realize I'm part of a larger whole, obligations towards a larger whole. And all of these things are profoundly inimical to traditional religion, and I think particularly inimical to traditional Christianity, because Christianity articulates the ultimate historic external authority, which is God Himself, as He has manifested Himself through His historical acts. He has represented Himself in our world through His people and through His church. So the tilt of modern individualism tilts us against finding traditional Christianity something that is desirable or plausible.
Yeah. It's such a helpful way to frame that the modern world we live in is bent towards the inward and maybe the present time and the future, whereas Christianity, the Christian faith, would tend to push us in the other direction, the external, looking outside ourselves for salvation, and then even into the past, as we look back to salvation history and even the history of the church. And so that's what this book is about, looking to the past to help shape and form who we are as Christians today. You published the first, we'll call it iteration or edition of this book, originally entitled The Creedal Imperative, which is 2012. So that's over 10 years ago. And that's a long time, as you know, in the publishing world. A lot happens in 10 years. And yet you say that your convictions around the core pieces have only grown stronger.
So if I could discover card right now, I can earn twice the cash back.
It's not like the book has become irrelevant in any sense. So, two related questions. What's the core thesis that you're trying to communicate in this book? And why is it more relevant today than it even was a decade ago?
Yeah, well, the core thesis is really that Christianity is an historic religion, therefore should be anchored in great creedal statements that great confessional statements, the great doctrines that have been formulated by the church over time. My burden in the original version of you was really to try to persuade evangelicals who have a very high view of God, very high view of God, very high view of Jesus, that all of the things that most valued were best preserved, transmitted, defended, taught through returning to those great confessional documents of the church. Many evangelicals have probably sort of an intuitive suspicion of history as well. Not the same reasons perhaps that I described in Acts of the first place. Desire to make sure they're faithful to Scripture, more out of a feeling that the Reformation liberated us from tradition, and we don't want to go back there. My argument in the first book was really that no, actually, biblical thinking is best protected by respecting great traditions, great traditional documents of the church. And the second question, why have my convictions on this issue become even stronger in years since, is that I think the problem in evangelicalism is not just the standard trajectories of evangelicalism, focusing on Scripture alone, things like that. The problem is the wider culture is pressing in on us, and none of us, church, are immune to the wider culture. And all of those things that I talked about in my first answer, the way that individualism has really come to reshape the way about history, the way we think about institutions, the way we think about authority, have only become more intense. And we're fooling ourselves if we think that those things have not had some impact on the church. I happen to think church on the whole had a job to address defending those wrong. But we're not intending to air the debris or so what I wanted to do in the second edition was not to a major revision or a major disruption, but reorienting that, bringing in a couple of other emphases to help people realize that actually creedalism, confessionalism, this return to the creeds and confessions, has even more benefits for us now than
yeah, you're a pastor, you are a professor, you meet people every day at Grove City College. What does it look like? What is this, over the last decade or so, what are the changes, very practically, you're seeing in terms of how young people in particular are expressing their thoughts about tradition and history and their identities as people? Is there anything that, any like commonalities or any through lines that you would point to that you have actually experienced yourself?
It's an interesting question. My answer is somewhat shaped by the fact that college is not a representative slice of territory. We tend on the whole to attract students either from very traditional Christian backgrounds or students from what I would describe as working class or lower middle class, socially conservative backgrounds. So one of the encouraging things that is that history is becoming
I'm
more
Cindy Lauper with fellow Cosentyx advocate Chef Michelle
their
Bernstein.
response
We'll share our experiences with plaque psoriasis, with psoriatic arthritis, and Dr. Panico will talk about the possible connections.
Cosentyx Secretary describes the adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis as needing milk in adults, and adults with active psoriasis as one of the don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx, or starting with tuberculosis. An increased risk of infection and low ability to fight the drugs like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor about infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Had a vaccine, inflammatory, or inflammatory bowel disease or develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com/Cindy.
Is a very good close colleague of mine in my own department, Reverend Don Shemson. A lot of students go to that church and I ask them, why do you go to Grace Abbey? You come from such and such a Baptist church, you come from such and such an evangelical where they do well taught the Bible, pastors love Christian friends. Typically the answer, once they've said, well, Pastor Ethan, Pastor Don are wonderful people, the next thing in their response is, we love the liturgy, love the rootiness ministry. We love the fact that when we worship on Sunday, we are connected not just with the saints around the world, but we're deeply rooted in what the saints have believed. Words they used in praise for many, many years. So, on that front, I'm encouraged that there is a reaction among some Christian youth who are finding what I would say the thinness of world that expresses individualism. Finding that thinness very unsatisfying. Look to satisfy their urges, their instincts, I suspect that their own representative young people. Well, I would love to see in the next decade is more and more of those evangelical churches become, where again I want to go out of my way. So I'm actually not a pastor anymore. I'm just a minister teaching at college. Huge admiration for anybody who's hard enough to good men. Those guys who love Jesus will come to realize that they could better serve them, especially better serve their young by orienting their own ministry back to greatness of roots of the will make places like Grace Anglican not the exception, if you like, but will make places like Grace Anglican more typical of what is going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think sometimes, I know I've heard critiques of young people. That's obviously happens all the time. As we get older, we love to critique the younger generations. But there can be a little bit of, maybe from lower church contexts, a little bit of suspicion around the way that young people, we kind of see this, people have written about this draw towards liturgy, draw towards higher church liturgical traditions, often coming out of a mega church kind of context. And sometimes you can be a little suspicious of that. Think, that's just chasing after a fad or pejorative even, and say that's, just a love for smells and bells, but it doesn't represent anything substantial. It sounds like, though, you're kind of saying there might actually be, that might reflect a deeper sense that young people even are picking up on, a thinness to our Christian faith as experienced oftentimes in churches and in our culture, that it's actually a true thing. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could certainly be some truth. There are facts. 20 years ago, whatever, it was the emergent church. And then it was the young restless reform. We know that there are fads that pick up followers, but we also know from those fads that not everybody involved was just there because of the fad. They were there because, say, in the emergent church, they realized the importance of community. And young restless both pointing to a lack in the churches from which they're. So I think our first response to the liturgical gives it a makes it more formal than it really is. But I would say the liturgical trend the first thing for us is, okay, what lack is this pointing to in our own churches? Let's think about this. Let's not just dismiss it out as what's making this lack cause? What makes it bizarre? What's attractive? Is something we can learn from this? Certainly, I do think we need to keep pressing people. But things do need to be true as well. It's not just bring up a worship to be beautiful. It has to be true.
Yeah.
So we can't let that slip. And I think thirdly as well, another way of putting this is something that's been said to me times by Christians who move these liturgical directions. We like going to church on Sunday where the worship is grown up. The worship is adult. Now that's their words, not mine. But I think I know what they're talking about. Recently there was an incident I wrote about in World Magazine where a Baptist pastor and his wife led worship dressed as Woody and his girlfriend from Toy Story. Now, I don't want to impute bad motives to the pastor doing that. But I do want to say it's hard for me if I came into an outsider to the church. It's hard for me to think that anything serious is going on. Not on Disney, I can Disney church. Paul is very clear when brief comment he makes in Corinthians about what happens when an outsider wanders into a Christian worship service. He falls flat on his face. He doesn't laugh, he's confused. He's struck with something serious, adult. Worship of the Holy God. Now, again, I don't want to say that the worship of the Holy God always looks the same all the time, all place.
There are no locks or short
Can you worship God with worship in your place? Of course. I don't want to be the most warm cultural
because that is the response, is that too often we conflate a certain cultural standard preference with kind of idea of
where favorite Disney characters meet fun for the whole family. Her wishes come true.
I would say that no culture in China would dressing up like
Disney
Woody and
cruises
Toy
were
Story.
magically succeeded.
From lunchboxes,
Communicate
to porcelains,
something
and movie
serious.
nights, there's never a bad time to share Lay's classic potato chips.
So,
Made with real potatoes, oil,
what
and
this
salt.
is to
That
say,
signature light texture and crispy crunch tastes better together. Best shared with friends, family, or your favorite coworkers. Whatever makes you happy. Lay's. What do it taste like? Tap Advantage to buy now and spread the joy with Lay's.
what's making it plausible, and what can we do better? What can we learn from this? Set aside the faddish nature of something. What can we learn from it? And I think, connecting back to my book, which was what I'm trying to push in this podcast, I guess, is one thing we do learn from it is that time is a great corroder of rubbish, and things that stand the test of time often do so for good reason. That is, they capture more of the truth, and they're more serious than ephemeral. So again, to go back to the book, talk about reasons. Why do I belong to a church where the Westminster Confession is still the doctrine said, well, 400 years on, the Westminster Standards are still something to be. One of the reasons for that is they've got to be touching this. 1,500 years on, more than 1,500 years on, we're still reciting Christ. Why are we doing that? Because you capture something and it connects to our hearts. Worshipping that God with other Christian believers.
It's a great segue into, I wrote down a number of maybe objections or at least questions that Christians often might have when it comes to the creeds and confessions and their role in our lives, both as individual Christians, but especially our lives in the church. The first one might be, my church already has a statement of faith, right? It's right there on our website. You can go read it. Why do we need this 300 or 400-year-old document written by Christians who lived in a very different time, right? Like the world was so different back during the Reformation and even in the hundreds of years after that. So what's the need there? What are we getting out of a creed or confession that a simple doctrinal statement doesn't provide?
Yeah, I mean, there are numerous things said. First of all, the age thing. as I already said, if something stood the test of time, there's probably a reason. I don't trust the Westminster Confession of Faith because it's 400 years old. I trust the Westminster Confession of Faith because it seems to me to make sense of the Bible stuff. And it seems to have made sense for a lot of people for the years since it was written. So there's that element to it. Secondly, if your church has a statement of faith, well, first of all, that's a great thing. I think it's better for a church to have a statement of faith than to have nothing at all. If you have nothing at all, then the pastor really can reinvent the faith every Sunday, and there's no way you can hold it to account. It's difficult for you to communicate to people outside the church what you believe or what your visitors come to. So it's great to have a statement of faith. I do think, though, it's helpful to have an elaborate statement, such as a confession. Why? Well, there are many reasons, but I'll just give two. One of them is pedagogically. If you only say have 10 points in your statement of faith, it's going to be very hard to convince people that the 11th point is important. You know, you're making a statement about what is and is not important. These 10 things are important. Everything else is negotiable.
As long as we can get the dish back to her.
And I think that's unfortunate.
We're in the closet.
It doesn't mean you can't
I might.
church with this thing. Of course you can.
Okay, sounds good to me.
But it could lead to complications. And the second reason is, you know, what are the complications it might lead to? Take, for example, one of the big pressing issues it's sort of been decided by the culture. It's still a pressing issue in the church. Gay marriage. If you have a 10-point statement of faith that was written in 2005, I bet it doesn't address marriage. I bet it doesn't address gay marriage. Well, that puts you in a very difficult position, because either you have to say, well, our church has a position on it, but we've not written it down. Or you have to now write it down, and it looks as if you're simply picking on gay people. If you subscribe to the Westminster Confession of Faith, what you have in that confession is a fairly elaborate anthropology teaching about what men and women are and how they are to connect to each other. Secondly, you have a statement on what marriage is. Now, the Westminster Confession of Faith does not address gay marriage directly. What it does is it tells what marriage is. Therefore, by implication, it excludes everything else that marriage isn't. Well, that allows me, let's say, when a gay couple come to my church, statement of faith and say, look, this is our position on marriage, and this is how it works into the whole doctrinal framework that we have. And it's not designed to exclude gay people. It's designed to affirm what marriage truly is. And by the way, it was written in 1647, so it certainly wasn't a homophobic document, if you like. Now, that's just one example where I think that if you have an elaborate statement of faith, you are better equipped to deal with the kind of cultural challenges that are getting thrown up by the world around. I remember being asked several times when teaching the seminary in the run-up to the gay marriage decision.
Snickers knows the holidays are full of bad decisions. Matching pajamas, office gift swaps, that fruitcake that no one asked for. But here's one decision you won't regret. Snickers trees, shaped like Christmas trees on the outside, filled with delicious chocolate, gooey caramel, fluffy nougat, and crunchy peanuts on the inside. All the holiday spirit without the holiday weirdness. Finally, a festive choice that actually makes sense. Snickers satisfies. Tap the banner to shop now.
But actually, because we have an elaborate statement of what the truth is, an awful lot of falsehood is excluded by implication.
Yeah.
So there's the two reasons I would say that are helpful.
Yeah, one response to that could be, that sort of presupposes a perspective on the church that is maybe one of almost putting up, this could be the critique. You're trying to establish all these walls to protect against false doctrine. And someone could say, well, my church, my aim with my church is more of to be a missional church, and I want to establish the core, the basic mere Christianity, so to speak, that we believe that is essential, and I want to allow a little more flexibility on a lot of these other things so as to reach more people, bring more people in, help them to worship God together, and I want to focus on the core. Well, is that a valid way to think about this?
Yeah, and I think that's a very important question. How well can we use your church? I would say the answer to that question, partly I would want to step outside the specific issue of creeds and confession and say, actually the welcome nature of churches is as much part of the ethos or the culture as it is the doctrinal document. So every church believes something, and therefore by definition does not believe the opposite of that thing. So every church has a creed somewhere. It's got to exclude something. Even your mere Christianity church excludes Unitarians. So the very nature of Christianity has for a doctrine doctrinal thing, not just a doctrinal thing, but a doctrinal thing, means there are boundaries and barriers there. The second thing I would say is it's important to think about how confessions particularly function in the church. I actually deal with this at a little bit of length in the book and say one of the great things I think about having a church where you have elders and also have lay people is this. We require more of elders than we do of lay people. So if you were to come to my church and say, Truman, I'm a Christian, I affirm Jesus has died for my sins, Jesus is Trinity, the scriptures are authoritative. And I believe that the elders have pastoral oversight and authority over me. I'd say to you, great, you can join my church.
Yeah.
You don't have to sign up to the Westminster Confession of Faith to be a member of the church. The Westminster Confession of Faith is a church document. What does that mean by that? Well, two things really. The Westminster Confession of Faith reflects the faith of the church, not necessarily of every single individual in every detail who belongs to that church. Secondly, it's a church document because it's something that has to be affirmed and maintained by the eldership. The eldership of the church. So you must, what I'm saying really there is, we demand more doctrinally of the elders than we do of congregants. And again, I think this is actually one of the ways in which confessions, oddly, we think of them as keeping people out, but actually they're liberating and they allow people in, because I'm saying, you and I can disagree on a heap of stuff, but I can't disagree with the confessions. But your disagreement with me on some things does not necessarily mean you can't be a member of my church.
And it allows me as a member to know, kind of with a lot of confidence, what you as the pastor or elder believe. It can kind of hold you to account, as you said before. Maybe another possible objection or question, you were emphasizing a minute ago the comprehensiveness, the exhaustive nature of some of these creeds and confessions for Christian doctrine, helping us to answer questions that might be coming up, whether about marriage or what it means to be a human. One response to that can be, well, doesn't the Bible already do that? Why do I need another another human-created document, why wouldn't we just point people to Scripture and let Scripture be that authority? Why introduce almost a middleman between Scripture and us as Christians today?
Well, many answers to that question. Why don't you Google what people think the
Scams are
Bible
everywhere. On
means,
your phone, in your inbox, even on your television
teaches
screen.
about
Tinder
marriage.
swindler.
And
What is
let
about
me
scams that
know
has
the
pop culture so
response.
obsessed? Maybe it's because it can happen to anyone. Maybe it's because we're
When
all
you
deeply
drive
fascinated
down
by
the
the cycle of
road
someone who
and
can
you
lie
see
with
that
ease and cheat
United
and no
Methodist
Scamfluencers is a
Church with
weekly
the
podcast
rainbow
that takes you
flag
into the world of
outside.
deception, sharing the stories of today's most notorious
Reach
scams.
out to the
Listen to
pastor,
Scamfluencers
he'll
wherever you
tell
get your
you
podcasts.
he's taking the Bible seriously.
Yeah, they're
He's
preaching
flying
from the
the
Bible.
Washington National Opera.
Yeah.
He's
In America's
flying the
figurehead, love is a game
rainbow
that
flag.
anyone
So,
can play.
first
In
of
our
all,
unit,
we all
passion,
know
power,
that
and duty clash in a battle
appeals to
between
the
heart and
Bible
mind.
are not
Disguising,
quite as
deception,
simple
love
as we
triangle,
like to
opera
think.
is always in season at the Kennedy
The
Center. Get your
Bible
tickets in the full
is
WNL schedule at
interpreted. We
TKC.co.
all
WNL.
interpret the Bible. And I want to suggest that some of us interpret the Bible more truly and better than others do. Obviously, the Bible doesn't simply mean whatever anybody wants it to mean. So there's that aspect to it. And then I would go to say, okay, if you go to the church, and this I think is the scenario I start the book with. You go to the church where somebody says, we have no
Hello. Okay.
That's about